we'll get our practice period started. So feeling into the bodily experience, bringing an aliveness to the physical experience, bringing in a sense of presence into what it's like to be sitting here now. Feeling connected and grounded. I'm often starting with the obvious sensations of pressure against the body. The feet, if you're sitting cross-legged, maybe it's the sides of the feet that are touching the ground. If you're in a chair, maybe it's the bottom of the feet. If you're lying down, maybe it's the back of the heels. Whatever it is, chances are your feet are resting on something and feeling the pressure, the contact against the body. Back of the legs. The buttocks. Feeling the contact, the pressure from the sitting surface. We can use these three areas, feet, back of the legs, buttocks, as grounding. We're here, connected, as a foundation. Be above this foundation, we feel the belly. Can there be some ease, some relaxation in the belly? Softness. In the chest. Sometimes we can armor ourselves by having some type of stiffness in the chest. As a way to protect ourselves, brace ourselves. Just for this small period this morning, can we let that soften? tuning in to sensations in the lower back, bringing some care and maybe some tenderness to this area, which often gives humans difficulties. In the upper back, between the shoulder blades. Can we rest our attention there with some kindness, some warmth? Shoulder blades slide down the back. We discover there's tension. It might be that resting awareness alleviates, softens the tension, but it might not be also. Can you be okay with that? Can you be okay with however the body is showing up this moment as best you can, as best you can? And then bringing awareness to the face and the head. Not uncommon to have tension around the mouth and jaw, the eyes. Maybe there's a band around the head that feels tight. Is there a way that they can be loosened? And then lastly, for this body scan, bringing awareness to our hands. The sensations of what they're touching. And the sensations of having hands. Do hands feel like from the inside. Maybe a little bit of tingly. Maybe nothing in particular. It's perfectly fine. Whatever you find. And then allowing the attention to tune into, become sensitive to the experiences of breathing. Just noticing how the body moves as it breathes. Nothing in particular needs to be happening. And just tuning into the sensations of breathing. And that will be enough. Welcome. Welcome. Greetings, everybody. This is the fourth day in this series that I'm doing on stories. And I'd like to share a short little story that comes from the suttas. And many of you might be familiar with this, but I like to look at it from a little bit different way than we often do. And maybe there's a way in which it can be a support for our practice in a bigger way than when we often think about this story. So the story is a simile that's given by the Buddha, and he's talking about teachings. So this is the simile that the Buddha is saying. Imagine a person in the course of a journey arrives at a great expanse of water, and the near shore is dangerous, and the far shore offers safety. But there's no ferry boat or bridge to take them across the water. So the person thinks, well, what if I collected grass, twigs, branches, and leaves and bound them together as a raft? And then, supported by the raft and by paddling with hands and feet, I should then be able to reach the far shore. So the person does this, and they succeed, and they get across to the far shore. And then, arriving at the far shore, it might occur to them, wow, that's Diana's little injection there. That's not in the suttas. Wow, this raft has been very helpful indeed. What if I were to hoist it on my head or load it on my shoulders and then proceed on my journey? And then the Buddha is turning to the people that he's speaking to, and he says, now, what do you think? By carrying the raft with them, would that person be doing what should be done with a raft? And then the people listening to him say, no, venerable sir. And the Buddha asks, so what should a person do with a raft? And then the people there in the audience respond, having arrived at the far shore, the person might think, yes, this raft has been very useful, but now I should just haul it onto dry land or release it and set it adrift in the water, and then go wherever I want. In this way, the person would be doing what should be done with the raft. So often when we hear this story, it's associated with, this is what we should be doing with the teachings, the doctrine, the Dharma. But what if it's just referring to, or we consider it to be referring to, just stories in general? Like, stories have a role, they can carry us to a different place, but then there's a time to let go of them. They can be a support in some contexts, but not in other contexts. And we might recognize that so much of some of the, maybe even psychotherapy, we might say, is to help us determine or acknowledge or discover some of the stories that we have from our youth, from our childhood. That was helpful, but that then they turn into patterns of behavior that we carry with us into our adulthood and no longer are helpful. And part of the maybe maturity, both in just the conventional maturing into an adult as well as spiritual maturity, is to recognize, oh yeah, some of these patterns, some of these stories that I have from when I was young are no longer so appropriate now as an adult. And so this question of whether to carry the raft or to leave it behind, I appreciate so much that in this simile, the Buddha is saying, on arriving at the far shore, so this place where there's safety, it might occur to them, this raft has been very helpful. What if I were to hoist it on my head or load it onto my shoulders? This is like maybe the definition of something that's burdensome, right? Carry this burden, put something on our head and walk around with it. And maybe we don't recognize the burdensome nature of it, or we don't maybe recognize the weight of it. But then the Buddha says that an alternative is to just maybe we carried it onto dry land, or maybe we let it go adrift in the water, and then the person is allowed to go wherever I want. So carrying this raft is burdensome and limits what is available to us. If we bring it onto dry land or let it adrift into the water, it allows us to go wherever I want. It allows us to no longer be pushed around by the circumstances of our lives, no longer to be pushed around by some of the stories that we're carrying. Instead, we have a certain amount of freedom. So, how is it that we can even recognize that we're carrying these stories and that they are burdensome? And for this, I'll tell a little story about myself, something that happened many years ago. This is when I was working in corporate America, and I was upset about something. And, funny that now I don't remember the details. I have no memory at all what these details were. But I remember kind of like this interaction that I had that had a big impact on me and on my life. So I was complaining about somebody in another department. This is what I remember. And so I remember I was telling this long, complicated story to my friend, and like, well, this person said this, and then because so and so was upset that they said this, and they sent an email to a whole bunch of people, including me, and then I felt upset about the email because it was so clear that this person really doesn't care about other people, and this person only wants to look good, and like this big, long, complicated story. As I said, I don't remember the details. I just remember kind of like the this gist of it. And then after my long story that was full of details, my friend said, "I'm sorry that that happened. Let's see if there are at least two other stories we can create using the same facts." And I was like, "What?" And she said, "No. So and so said something. You were there for that. And later you received an email. These were two facts. What are some other stories that we could do with this?" And I was like, "No, I don't understand what you're asking me." In fact, I even felt offended. Like, what do you mean this is a story? No, they said this because of blah, blah, blah. And then this other person sent this email because of blah, blah, blah. Even look right now when I'm telling the story, I'm like feeling a little bit agitated. So I was able to calm down and recognize, oh yeah, I was making meaning. I was trying to say, well, they said this because of X, Y, and Z. And then this email that's sent, reading between the lines, was A, B, and C. And not recognizing that this was fabricated in my mind. It's not actually the truth. I don't actually know why that person said what they said. I don't actually know precisely what's between the lines in an email. So how can we recognize if we don't have a friend that's saying to us, okay, using the same amount of facts, what are some other stories? And for the record, I did end up making all kinds of stories, just outlandish stories, practical stories. It became kind of fun to say, okay, well, maybe Mars came down and embodied this person. And then some that were completely ridiculous. And then some that started to be like, oh yeah, maybe has nothing to do with me, or maybe has only to do with, maybe they have a child that's sick at home, and they're worried about this child, and that's why they were said something with this kind of a tone or something like this. So if we don't have somebody to just remind us, okay, are there other ways that we could interpret or and gain meaning from these things? What could highlight to us that we're making stories? And this little simile points to this. I would say in the simile, the person who's making the raft says, what if I collected grass, twigs, branches, and leaves, and bound them together as a raft. And supported by the raft and by paddling with my hands and feet, I should then be able to reach the far shore. So this is pointing to like direct experiences, like what is here and now. Branches, twigs, and leaves is what the person was experiencing while they were on the shore. And paddling with my hands and feet is what they're actually doing with the body, how the body is moving. So it's being present for our direct experience. Feeling the hands, using the hands and feet is like feeling what is the experience that the body is having. What's present right there? Twigs and leaves and branches. The story is what the mind is doing. What's not the story is what the body is doing. And then the story, what the mind is doing, is often very different than what's being experienced by the body, right? We often have, the body is in one place here with leaves and branches, and the mind is somewhere else. So there's often a sense of, so that's maybe one distinction we can make between the story and what's actually happening. So the story is not in the same place as the mind, but it also has this sense of this very quiet sense of I don't want or I should. These kind of like two flavors. The story has a feeling of like I don't want or I should. So this is often what the mind is adding on top of our direct experience. So then the question arrives, well, this simile of the raft, this story is about letting go of stories. So one, we have to recognize what is a story. And that is to make the distinction between what's happening in the mind and what's happening in the body. And then the question is, how do we let go of the stories? And that is about being embodied. It's like being with the felt experience. What are the leaves, twigs, branches of this moment? What is the body feeling like in this moment? Feeling grounded, feeling our feet on the ground, feeling connected to the whatever surface we're sitting or standing on. That's how we let go. It's not that we have to push away the thoughts, or we don't have to negate them or say that they don't matter. We're just bringing attention towards the felt experience of this moment. And that's how we can let go of the stories. When we're embodied from that perspective, we can start to see the sense of I don't want or I should. That's very often just quietly like spewing up like all these thoughts that maybe might be so familiar that we don't recognize, like, oh yeah, this is part of the story. Sometimes it's the story of me or the story of whatever happened or something like that. So I offer this as take what's helpful and leave behind what isn't helpful, but as a way for us to feel how some of the stories are burdensome. We're trying to carry them on our heads and shoulders, and they weigh us down, prevent us from going where we want to go, preventing us from having the freedom. And part of it is to recognize, well, what are stories? What are the narratives that we are carrying around that are extra, that we don't need to? And so much about that is just being embodied. So thank you. Thank you. And I'll see you tomorrow for our last installment of this idea of stories. Thank you. Thank you all. It's lovely. Lovely to be part of this Sangha. Tracy, looking forward to seeing you at Cloud Mountain in October. Fantastic. Nisha and I are looking forward to teaching there. I'm wishing everybody a wonderful rest of the day, whether your day is ending or just beginning. May we notice the stories that are helpful and the ones that are not so helpful.